I'm sitting here. Sony, hi.
Hey, David, how you
John,
doing?
thank you so much. We love having John. He's such a big supporter of Techonomy and a deep thinker and one of the most impactful people in the technology industry over many decades. I want to ask you a lot of questions about what you're doing and why you're up here with Sony. But Sony, you are a co-founder of a company called Pensando Systems. Just quickly tell us what it is. And I know you were at Cisco for many years. You've created this company with a few partners that you've worked with for many years inside Cisco and even before. Talk about what you're trying to do.
In a nutshell, Pensando is trying to democratize the cloud. If you look at a company like AWS that has been leading the public cloud markets through an acquisition of a company called Annapurna, they have utilized the technology to really power the infrastructure on which AWS has become such a competitive platform. Pensando, by innovating with our own technology, is catering to any and all customers, whether they are public cloud customers as well as enterprises, that want to build their cloud to leapfrog the incumbent, which is AWS. And we believe that we have the underlying platform and an architecture that allows our customers to build.
What will that leapfrog enable those customers to do that they couldn't do with AWS?
Well, it will allow them the ability to have metrics such as 900 times less latency. So as the cloud moves to the edge, how do you respond to 500 million IoT or 5G enabled and AI enabled workloads to have access to those cloud experiences as it goes closer to where the data resides, which is the edge, and the ability to deliver a performance which is 500% faster than what an AWS can afford to deliver today at about a third of the power profile. So this is a very, very advanced programmable processor-based technology as well as a software stack that allows them to bring all of those capabilities.
So it's a hardware-software combination, but it exists sort of at the core of the network and helps things happen on the edge, or does it actually exist in part on the edge also?
Well, you can deploy it all the way either to the edge, which is where your apps and your data today resides, and as the cloud experiences are becoming more and more enabled at the edge. At the same time, it would also be relevant within your data centers. So given all the attributes of this technology, it really helps you build a cloud platform where you want to build a cloud platform.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Sure, we could go much further down that path, but so John, I know that you're very excited about this company, but and tell us why you wanted to appear together with Sony. We've had you on your own the last 2 years. I know you're a huge believer in startups and their potential to be the single biggest catalyst for growth and social progress.
So I think you nailed it also going back to your initial conversation. If you really think about the future of technology, and I'm a believer tech for good will win out eventually, but it will be the next generation of startups that will determine which way this goes. All job creation will come from startups or small companies getting bigger. The large companies will not add headcount here in the US, Europe, Asia over the next decade because of automation, artificial intelligence, a tremendous stream of digitization. And so really the future of our country depends upon how strong is their startup engine and also what culture does that startup engine bring. So my life now is focused on 3 issues. First is I really want to make a difference. Secondly, I really want to live life to its fullest. And third, I want to give back. And there's nothing more exciting than how do you do this as a startup engine and helping the startups to accelerate dramatically. And David, from the beginning, remember tech used to be for good. 90% of Americans felt tech was in their benefit. And it's only been the last 7 to 8 years that we kind of get sidetracked. I think next generation startups should have a different mentality toward profitability with social responsibility at the same time. And by the way, that also is the best answer for capitalism. In Cisco won every corporate social responsibility award there was to win, and we returned, 156,000% if you invested $1,000 in Cisco stock when we went public, and we made 10,000 millionaires. So I think you can do the two combined, and I think the next generation of startups will have a huge influence on how does that win out.
So why are you excited about Pensando in particular? And you're serving as chairman of the board of this company.
Absolutely.
Which is more than you're doing with a lot of your other investments, clearly.
Well, very simple. When you compete in this world, people get confused competing against a competitor. You never compete against a competitor. If you do that, you're looking to the past. You get the next business model transition, you get the next technology transition. Clearly, everything's going to move to the edge. The next generation of cloud will move to the edge, compute will, storage will, security will, 5G will drive that very, very fast, 500 billion devices connected to the internet. And if a company can be there on the edge that enables innovation at a faster pace to give options instead of being locked into an AWS, and Jeff's done an amazing job, I'm not being critical, but it's a monopoly. And they control this thing so strongly that even the strong players, a Microsoft or an IBM or Oracle, cannot. What Pensando is able to do is they give choice at the edge, and all of a sudden you have large companies doing what we talked last year on stage, partnering with startups in an ecosystem to give them innovation and growth. And so all of a sudden you have major players like Oracle betting a large part of the architectural future on Pensando. Companies like HPE, where we just talked at their leadership forum and their sales conference, talking about how do they reinvent and bring innovation back to HPE underneath Antonio Neri's approach. How do you have Goldman Sachs, which often leads technology in the next generation, doing this, and Equinix doing this? In the storage moving to the edge, you have a NetApp suddenly saying, how do you do this? You will see a series of other startups occurring very rapidly, looking at how you work with these large companies in a different way. So I think Pensando will be the role model. We'll see if it works as well as we think. But you can't take on a big giant as a startup. They can roll over in their sleep and crush you. You've got to do it as an ecosystem, and you've got to do it. Sony went through the numbers. 500% to 900% either more throughput or less latency in terms of the effectiveness at a third of the power cost. And then you enable all these other players to go after the giant. And David, if there's one thing I know how to take on the giants.
Okay, good.
World.
Sony, when you talk about everything moving to the edge, and John mentioned that too, how much is that the reality because of the emergence of 5G? And in other words, how fundamentally different of a digital societal architecture are we headed toward? And how much is that why you have an opportunity?
5G is clearly one of the enablers, but I think if you combine that with AI and IoT and all the other technologies that are happening at the same time, which are driving a lot of the data and the applications to move to the edge, it's the perfect storm which gets created. It's the ability, the underlying infrastructure, which is the 5G as one of the enablers. It is the immersive experiences and the IoT types of transactions, which are billions of devices that are coming online, and combine that with AI and all the other processing that needs to occur at the edge. All of these are elements that are contributing to that.
But why do we need processing at the edge?
Well, you need processing at the edge because rather than taking all of those devices and all of that data and bringing it back and overhauling it back into your data centers, which and you cannot solve for the speed of light, you're constrained by that. You want to have the ability to drive that processing as close to where the data needs to be delivered with the influx of technology enablements that are occurring one after the other, and creating that situation where the edge is eventually where the intelligence and the processing capabilities have to reside.
One last question, I want to go back to you, John, but what's the hardest thing technically that you've encountered in making that happen? Is it the security piece?
Well, security has to be baked into the architecture day one. It cannot be an afterthought anymore. And especially as all of this is moving to the cloud. So security has to be there day one. What has been key to solving the complexity is the programmability at the data plane layer. Because the data plane is where all the action is occurring. And while we have built 4 ASICs in the past with programmability.
That's application-specific integrated
circuitry. It is the combination of the processing capability with high speed of memory and making everything programmable in a device and in an architecture that has the ability to deal with storage, has the ability to deal with networking. Security has to be baked in, and the ability to deal with a lot of different workloads and applications that need to be enabled with this processing capabilities.
You know, John, it's funny. I remember when you were at Cisco and you were kind of pivoting towards putting IoT as a really high priority.
Yes.
I met with you with a few other journalists at Davos, and you were saying, there's going to be 50 billion endpoints, right? And now you're saying 500 billion endpoints. But talk to us from your point of view, what kind of a world will that enable? And maybe you could even tie it to this climate issue, which we're trying to touch on as much as we can here. Is it going to give society some fundamental new capabilities that we currently lack?
I think it will change every aspect of our lives and every business model. In simple terms, over 75% of all compute, storage, transactions, apps, security will occur at the edge. You'll see, I'm a West Virginian by background, all mining will be done virtually at the edge in capabilities with no humans, literally in the mine sites. And so it will change every business model. Doesn't matter if you're finance, doesn't matter if you're manufacturing, doesn't matter if you're government, et cetera, in a unique way. What Sony and team, and just to give you a little bit of background, some of you may be aware of this, their team is known as MPLS, Mario, Prem, Luca, and Sony. Together, we've built 8 #1 products over 25 years of working together, always with 40 to 70% market share. And contrary to what we might have discussed 2 years ago at this conference, it's a software world only. The top software companies are realizing it's going to be a software world on top of world-class hardware. But world-class hardware will be programmable silicon. If you can't do this and you don't understand compute, if you don't understand storage, if you don't understand the internet, if you don't understand security, the hard part is how do you do that uniquely together, and how do you get your software teams and your custom ASICs team working together? Why is this company able to be in stealth mode for 2.5 years and announce with $238 million of funding behind it, aligning with the top players in the industry? It speaks that innovation in the large existing companies will come from startups and a unique ecosystem of partnering. So that's what this team has done well, and I'm kind of pretty excited about it in terms of their future.
Well, you know, so much of Silicon Valley has been obsessed with consumer tech and even specifically apps. That's sort of been the
Perfect
obsession
question.
for a decade, really.
Yeah.
So, Sony, when you started working on this, maybe even before John got involved, or you probably were talking to him all along, but did you encounter, and are you still encountering, a bias against hardware in the investment community and in Silicon Valley?
Well, I think Google has proven that as the new age applications are coming into play, while everything has to be software defined, as John said, you need an underlying platform that is going to power those applications. And when you build underlying silicon with programmability, bringing it to life are your customers. And that's where we partnered with customers in every segment. We pick leaders in their respective segments.
And you have some very powerful partners.
Very powerful customers, including the likes of Goldman Sachs, that took this product into production already as they were building out a highly secure private cloud and getting ready for the hybrid cloud world in a multi-cloud environment. We had NetApp in the same situation, where their entire mid-range all-flash software-defined storage platform ships default out of factory with our products embedded within that portfolio. And that was a 2-year partnership, deep partnership. And the same is the case with the likes of Oracle. As they're building out their cloud, they want to power the entire cloud infrastructure with Pensando as they want to continue to grow their platform as a service offering and make their customers that are on-prem move their properties onto their cloud. So it's a whole range of customers, whether these are leading-edge software companies, whether they are platform companies, or whether they are financial services companies.
I'm sure there's many people in the audience and watching the live stream, like, for example, my wife, hi, Elena, who wondered what it really means. What does processing at the edge really mean, and how does it connect to what John was saying, that, like, mines won't have any people in them? I mean, is it concretely the ability to do all this very sophisticated work at the edge that will enable us to get rid of those dangerous jobs in the mines, for example? Is that the answer?
That is exactly correct. I mean, if you think about the rate at which this whole industry is moving towards automation, you want to have the ability for as much of this technology to be automated. And the examples that John said, or even when you listen closely to what Gartner has been predicting, which is by 2023, 75% of all applications of the enterprise will move to the edge. So that implies that if that level of application is going to be moving to the edge, you do need the processing capabilities and the ability to build out the cloud experiences at the edge.
But David, the important takeaway here is not to let us find ourselves in an undesirable position 5 to 10 years from now. The technology that we're talking about, digitization, artificial intelligence, is going to destroy 20 to 40% of the jobs as we know them today. 20 to 40%. Large companies are not going to add headcount. If that's the case, you have to probably triple or quadruple the number of startups, new jobs being created out of this. And yet we are the only major country in the world, quote, the American Silicon Valley mentality, that doesn't have a national program for startups. France, which we've talked about before. France, when we said France would be the startup nation in Europe, and I remember a lot of skeptics in the room when you and I debated that, they are not only the startup nation for Europe, they are up 5x in terms of venture capital-backed startups in 4 years. And now they're talking about, Bloomberg is saying they will be the economic engine of Europe.
But you're saying that's specifically because government got more involved?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but they got involved in combination with partnerships toward a common goal. Macron is as good as you see. He takes risk. He's fearless in going after it, a digital France. And you could say, well, France is the exception. Go to India.
Well, talk about China, too, because isn't there a pretty big contrast between what's happening there and us?
There is, dramatically, and break your question into two pieces. If I were betting on one country in Asia right now, I'd bet on India. And remember, I bet on China in a big way in 93, 95 at a time that no one else did on business. And it worked out very well for me. But what you're seeing is China is moving to a win-lose mentality, and it's win at Chinese nationalism perspective, lose for America. And so even though I'm a person that's hard-pressed to say which party I want to represent now, Trump was right in taking on China. If you look at India, think about the government lead. Modi in India outlines a digital India is his primary plank for India's future. He's talking about growing his income of every citizen in India by 7 to 10% a year. He's talking about how do you generate 1.2 million jobs a month. He builds around technology, government, and business working together. That goes back to the question you had earlier. I think, David, we're becoming too short-term focused. What are we trying to solve versus Facebook's missteps? And boy, they did misstep. As opposed to where's this economy going to go? What role will the startups play in that? And are these new generation of startups going to be those that believe in tech is for good, tremendous capital returns, but also good for society, sharing the success with the employees, which we believe firmly in, and thinking about the implications of how you change the world.
So here's a quick question, easy, haha. I don't know how much you listened to my conversation with Andrew, but
yeah, it was a good one.
Do you think that maybe we're focused, that I am focusing on the wrong thing, thinking about fixing the companies that exist now, and we should focus instead on creating new companies and institutions that will allow us to do things fundamentally different and just let these old ones wither on the vine?
Well, with the last sentence excluded, I think the future of technology 10 to 15 years from now will be how the next generation of startups drive it. Remember, during the 80s and 90s, it was clear the creativity was coming from technology companies that work with business. In 2000 CES, I said the future will be about how technology companies work with the consumer. It's a 2-decade run. We're at the end of those 2 decades. You're now starting to see the creative technology. It doesn't matter whether it's security, it doesn't matter if it's how you cure a cancer, et cetera, often be business to business again. So I think we're about to see a full 360 evolution. So I would like to see more of our energies focused about how technology and the next generation of startups come in with the right mentality. How you make profit. Sony, how much money we will make 4 years from now?
We'll be breaking even in 3 years from now, and we'll be generating 100 million of cash flow in 4 years.
Free cash flow and 100 million of profits. How many other startups are thinking that way?
Just like we
Back
were.
to the basics. Back to the basics.
Yeah.
Back to the future. You and I have seen the movie.
Let's get the audience in here. We've got little time. I want to hear if anybody has a comment, a question about
You know
anything.
the fun part, David, I haven't changed. The way I love doing this.
But did somebody get their hand up, or are you just going out in the
Here, I'll
audience
steal the microphone, if I
preemptively?
may.
Oh,
All right. So the first question sets the whole tone for how
he's
the
like
Q&A section
better than
goes.
Phil Donahue.
No
this guy.
pressure on you at all.
But John,
Well,
okay,
this is the last question of the day.
not at all.
My question is about a sector called healthcare.
Yes.
And I was thinking about how edge computing plays into the sector and your thoughts on healthcare in general.
Gotcha. I think every industry.
Mike. Oh, you've got a point.
I've got one. Every industry is going to use this movement to the edge as changing their game. And it isn't going to be where the finance industry moves first, and then retail second, and manufacturing third, and healthcare and mining are all of this at the end. You're going to see healthcare move with tremendous speed. You're going to be able to both track an individual's data points, but also respond to it at the edge. And my view has been you always follow where VC money is going to go if you want to know where the future is. And so guess what? VC money is going into healthcare in a big way for the first time in probably 15 years, David.
Yeah.
Next
Okay,
question.
But wait. Okay, maybe one more. We're really out of time. Can somebody ask a quick one? Does somebody have a quick one? Okay, the orange shirt was the first hand I saw.
Gotcha. He's got the mic going, Phil.
Okay.
Sony, this is your question.
Wait, I want to
regardless
ask
of what
Sony,
it is.
does John always run into the audience at every public event?
This is yes.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you.
We've worked together. We've announced.
This is the
10
third year in a
products
row he's done it at Techonomy, but we love it. It was a great photo opportunity. Go ahead.
This is Vaibhav Parikh from Nishit Desai Associates. A quick question. We discussed about climate change and the technologies for climate change coming up versus a lot of new technologies which goes to the consumers either on health side, on convenience side, etc. The question really is that new startup which will come up, which will take on the existing guys and others, how much they are focusing on climate change, how much they will be focusing on some of the key issues which we have been talking about in trying to reduce the negative effects of tech, and will that get funded?
Good question.
All right, we're going to split it into two parts. You take the first part, I'll take the second, or I'll take the first part and talk about the big thing, then you say how you're going to do this at the edge. Prime Minister Modi, when he outlined the Digital India, he basically said, John, I want to talk about GDP growth. I want to talk about 1.2 million jobs per month. I want to talk about becoming a startup nation. I want to inclusive across 29 different states, not just 9 states where 90% of the venture capital goes into. I want smart cities. But he said, this technology should be able to solve the environmental issues. And he was right. You can basically look at technology and being able to save probably 40% of the water that they use in India. You can basically look at this and how you control the regulation in terms of not doing the carbon generation that Europe, the US, and China did when they do the economic growth. And this needs to be done not at a central site. It has to be done at the edge. So how do we do that, Sony, in terms of how we think about it?
In our case, when we designed this architecture, we knew that if we had to have the ability to process 500 million transactions at the edge, we would not have to draw thousands of watts of power. The best example I would like to cite is a hyperscale customer. When they looked at our technology, they said, what will take me about tens and thousands of servers to do, you would have the ability to do it in half a rack. In a half a rack, you will be able to process 500 million connections and secure those connections.
So that's a massive energy saving.
Massive
Huge.
energy savings.
And 20 to 40% of the servers that go into data centers today, so it's an economic saving.
Wow,
But
okay.
perhaps the most
We gotta
exciting
wrap
part
it
of
up.
what they're doing, this will democratize the cloud as it moves to the edge. It gives everybody a choice of where you want to put your information, which allows everybody to be innovative on this as opposed to controlled by one player.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us, and that's a great integration of many of our themes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.